They said no maid ever lasted in that house. Not a single one. The imposing gate promised grandeur, and the mansion itself was simply breathtaking. But just beyond the facade, within those ornate walls, lay a relentless battleground. And at the heart of it all was Madame Rose. Beautiful, impeccably polished, yet lethally sharp with her words. Her slaps came without warning, her yells echoed without mercy, and her carefully crafted insults could cut far deeper than any whip. In a mere 6 months, she had broken the spirits of 9 maids. Some fled in tears, overwhelmed by the torment. Others departed before the first pangs of homesickness even struck. One even scaled the back fence barefoot, desperate to escape. Then Naomi arrived. Dark-skinned, quiet. She carried only a worn nylon bag and the smoldering fire in her eyes. She wasn't there to run. She wasn't there to seek anyone's approval. She had a sick daughter, and she felt she had nothing left to lose. But she also possessed a weapon Madame Rose had never encountered before: unwavering resolve. What Naomi did in that house didn't just transform her own life. It shattered the seemingly unbreakable Madame Rose. The mansion on Bishop Adme Drive, nestled on Banana Island, was the kind of place that made passers-by slow down and stare in awe. A towering black gate stood guard, leading to a flawless driveway. The cars gleamed, so meticulously polished that they captured the sun like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Yet, beyond that perfect exterior, the air hung heavy, thick with unspoken tension. The staff moved like shadows, their steps measured and silent. Even Mama, the seasoned chef who had once cooked for presidents, carefully measured each step as if fearful of disturbing the oppressive silence. That silence had a source, a single, formidable individual: Madame Rose Richards. Some whispered of her as Madame Ice, others as Madame Perfection. And when she passed, older staff members would mutter a name in hushed tones, a name they dared not utter aloud in her presence. At 33, Madame Rose looked as though she had stepped straight out of the glossy pages of a fashion magazine, tall, fair-skinned, and always impeccably dressed as if a red carpet awaited her, even if she was only planning a stroll through the garden. Her perfume lingered long after she had swept through a room, a potent reminder of her presence. Her words, however, lingered even longer, often leaving a stinging residue. She didn't simply give instructions, she issued commands. She didn't just discipline, she struck with a slap or a sentence sharp enough to leave invisible wounds etched upon the soul. In this house, her opinion was law, her whim, a decree. And in just half a year, 9 maids had walked out under that same imposing black gate. Some in tears, some in stunned silence, and one without even pausing to retrieve her shoes. The house itself wasn't the problem. The workload, though demanding, wasn't the problem. The problem was her. Madame Rose. She was Mr. Femi Richards' second wife. The first had passed away many years ago, leaving a void, a silence that had never truly been filled in the sprawling mansion. Mr. Femi Richards was a man who wore power like a second skin. Approaching 60, with distinguished silver streaks in his hair, he possessed 2 thriving oil companies, and more houses than most people owned pairs of shoes. His name was spoken with respect, even reverence, everywhere. Of course, it was. But what they whispered about most was the revolving door of maids, until Naomi arrived and disrupted the narrative. Nobody said hello. Nobody bothered to ask her name. They were simply too weary of learning names that changed every week. The weary housekeeper merely pointed to a mop and muttered, "Start with the marble floors. Madam is coming downstairs." Naomi didn't argue. She simply tied her worn scarf a little tighter, picked up the mop, and began to work. She had one reason for being there, and that reason was her daughter, Deborah, who was in and out of the hospital. The medical bills were piling up, threatening to drown her in a sea of debt. Naomi whispered to herself, "Just endure it. Even if they insult you, endure it. 3 months, that's all." For Debbie, she was still wiping the center rug when she heard it. Click, clack, click, clack. The unmistakable sound of stilettos, then silence. Naomi looked up and there she was, Madame Rose, standing at the top of the grand staircase in a wine-colored silk robe, holding a delicate cup of tea as if she owned the entire world. She appraised Naomi from head to toe, then glanced at the mop, then at the bucket of water beside her. Without uttering a word, she deliberately tipped the bucket over. The dirty water splashed across the freshly cleaned tiles. Naomi gasped, instinctively stepping back. Madame Rose advanced, her eyes glacial. "This is the third time this week someone blocks my walkway. I'm not in the mood. Clean it now." Naomi didn't speak. She bent down and picked up the mop again. Her worn slippers were soaked through, but she kept cleaning. From the hallway, the housekeeper whispered under her breath, "She won't last. She looks too soft." But what nobody knew was this. Naomi had buried her pride long ago. She had cleaned homes where she was treated far worse. She had begged in hospitals for her daughter's life, her voice hoarse with desperation. She wasn't soft. She was silent fire, burning with a fierce determination. The next morning, Naomi woke up well before 5 a.m. She swept the front yard, meticulously cleaned the glass doors, and mopped the sitting room again. This time with less water, no splash, no mistakes. She hadn't come to play games. By 6:30 a.m., she was in the kitchen washing plates beside Mama Ronk, the cook. "You woke up early," Mama Ronk said, surprised. Naomi smiled gently. "I'm just trying to do my work. Just be careful. This house, it's not about early morning. Oh, it's about surviving Madame's mouth." Right on cue, they heard the soft padding of slippers. Soft, controlled, and filled with an underlying anger. Madame Rose entered the kitchen in a silk robe tied tightly around her waist, her phone clutched in her hand. "Where's my lemon water?" she asked sharply, her voice cutting through the morning air. Mama Ronk rushed forward, flustered. "I was just about to." "I wasn't asking you," she cut in, turning her piercing gaze to Naomi. Naomi quickly wiped her hands and bowed slightly. "I'll get it now, Ma." Madame Rose narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing her. "Room temperature, not cold, not warm, just right. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma. Because if I take one sip and my throat feels like it entered a sauna, you will regret your life." Naomi nodded, her expression unwavering. "Yes, Ma." She picked out a glass, poured water from the dispenser, and carefully added 2 slices of lemon. She walked slowly, her hands steady, her feet silent, up the marble stairs to Madame Rose's room. She knocked softly. "Ma, your water. Come in." The room was spotless, almost sterile. Gold curtains framed the windows, and perfume bottles sparkled like jewels on the dresser. A small white dog sat regally on the bed, as if it were royalty. Naomi placed the tray gently on the side table. Madame Rose didn't offer a thank you. She took the glass, sipped, paused. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. Then Madame Rose smirked, a fleeting expression that sent a chill down Naomi's spine. "You're lucky," she said. "You got it right." But just as Naomi turned to leave, Madame Rose spoke again, her voice laced with a venomous sweetness. "There's a stain on the bathroom sink. I hate stains. I'll clean it now, Ma." As Naomi entered the bathroom, her eyes immediately caught a faint rust stain on the sink, likely left by someone's ring. Without hesitation, she reached for the cleaning spray and began to scrub gently, careful and focused. Then, thud, her shoulder brushed against a perfume bottle. It wobbled precariously. She caught it just in time, her breath hitching in her throat. A quiet sigh of relief escaped her lips. But when she turned around, Madame Rose was standing by the doorway, her arms folded across her chest, her expression unreadable. Without a word of warning, she walked forward and slapped Naomi hard across the face. Naomi's head snapped to the side with the force of the blow. "You're clumsy," Madame Rose said coldly, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I don't like clumsy people." Naomi's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to cry. She bowed her head and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma." Then, gently, she picked up the perfume bottle and placed it back in perfect alignment with the others, her hands trembling slightly, but her spirit remaining steady. "You'll clean the guest room next," Madame Rose said, already sinking into her bed, her phone once again in her hand. And iron the bed sheet while it's on the bed. I don't like wrinkles. Naomi nodded again, her voice barely audible. Yes, Ma. As she left the room, Mr. Femi was standing in the hallway. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his face held a calm expression. He had heard everything. Their eyes met briefly. He didn't speak, but Naomi could see it, that small flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes. But she didn't need pity. She needed that salary desperately. She walked past him without a word and went straight to the guest room. Because in Naomi's heart, one thing was crystal clear. She would not leave. Not until her daughter could have a chance. By the third day, everyone in the house was watching, their eyes following Naomi's every move. Naomi hadn't cried. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't packed her bag and run like the others. But Madame Rose wasn't finished with her yet. Not even close. She didn't like being ignored. She didn't like being studied. And something about Naomi's unwavering silence felt like defiance, a challenge to her authority. So, she decided to turn up the heat, to test Naomi's breaking point. First, it was the missing uniforms. Naomi had just finished cleaning the guest room. When she returned to her small quarters, she discovered that her uniform was gone. All that remained in the cupboard was a flimsy, see-through lace nightgown that clearly wasn't hers. Naomi didn't say a word. She came out wearing a faded t-shirt and her own wrapper, a simple cloth garment wrapped around her waist. The housekeeper gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're going out like that?" Naomi only replied, her voice quiet but firm, "It's clean. It's decent. It's enough." Later that day, Madame Rose came downstairs, took one look at her, and a slow, mocking smile spread across her face. "Did you sleep in the gutter? Or are you just dressing to match the mop?" Some of the staff chuckled nervously, their eyes darting between Naomi and Madame Rose. Naomi didn't respond. She bowed her head, picked up the mop, and kept working, her gaze fixed on the floor. But the more she didn't react, the more unsettled Madame Rose became. Then came the carefully orchestrated accidents. Madame Rose deliberately poured red wine on the pristine white sitting room rug and acted as if it were a genuine mistake. But it wasn't. She did it on purpose, just to test Naomi's patience, to see how far she could push her. Naomi didn't ask questions. She didn't complain. She quietly picked up a towel and started cleaning the stain, her movements methodical and precise. Once, Madame Rose even accused Naomi of breaking a crystal bowl that she herself had carelessly knocked over. Still no reaction. Naomi simply said, her voice calm and even, "I'll clean it up, Ma." Even Mr. Femi Richards began to take notice. One evening, he sat quietly in the garden with his newspaper when he saw Naomi sweeping near the flowers. Her wrapper was torn at the edge, a testament to her hard work. Her face looked tired, etched with exhaustion, but her hands were steady and unwavering. "Naomi, right?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. "Yes, sir," she said, stopping to greet him properly. "Are they treating you well here?" he asked carefully, his eyes searching her face. She paused for a moment, then offered a small, enigmatic smile. "They're treating me like life treats many of us, sir. But I'll be okay." He blinked, surprised by her unexpected response. That night, Mr. Femi looked at Rose, his expression thoughtful, and said, "Why is that girl still here? With the way you've treated her, most people would have quit by now." Rose took a slow sip of her wine, a slight smile playing on her lips, and said, "She's still useful. That's why she's here." But even she could feel it. The energy in the house had subtly shifted. Naomi didn't fight back with words or tears. She fought back with her mere presence, with her unwavering patience, with that quiet, unshakable dignity that couldn't be bought or sold in any market. And that was starting to scare Madame Rose, more than she cared to admit. It was Saturday morning. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and a soft drizzle tapped gently on the windows of the mansion. Inside, the house was unusually quiet, devoid of its usual tension. No insults echoed through the halls, no doors slammed in anger, no names were shouted in frustration. Naomi, noticing that she had just finished sweeping the east wing, passed by the hallway mirror and saw a reflection that made her stop dead in her tracks. Madame Rose was seated on the cold marble floor, barefoot, her silk scarf half falling off her head, her makeup smeared, mascara running down her face like someone had wiped away tears too quickly. Naomi froze, stunned. She had never seen the woman look so vulnerable, so human. Madame Rose hadn't seen her yet. She was staring at herself in the mirror, almost as if she didn't recognize the woman looking back at her. Her red wine from the night before still sat on the floor beside her, an open invitation to ruin. Her phone was locked, abandoned. Her expensive heels were thrown haphazardly to one side. Naomi wanted to turn back, to pretend she hadn't seen anything. This wasn't her business, she reasoned. But something deeper than mere duty held her feet rooted to the spot. She stepped forward slowly, hesitantly. "Ma!" Madame Rose turned sharply, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Her face, usually fierce and firm, looked cracked, almost soft. "What do you want?" she asked sharply, wiping her face roughly with the back of her hand. Naomi bowed her head, her voice filled with concern. "Sorry, Ma. I didn't mean to disturb you." She placed a small, neatly folded, clean towel beside her on the floor. Then she turned to leave, eager to escape the uncomfortable scene. "Wait!" Naomi stopped, her back still turned. Rose stared at her, her eyes red and swollen, her voice shaky and raw. "Why do you stay?" she asked, the question hanging in the air like a fragile thing. Naomi was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts, choosing her words carefully. Then she said gently, "Because I need to, for my daughter." "You could get another job," Rose countered, her voice laced with a hint of disbelief. Naomi smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. "Maybe, but they won't pay like this one, and my daughter's hospital doesn't accept stories." Rose looked at her, studying her face, searching for something. "You're not scared of me?" Naomi hesitated, then spoke the truth, the words tumbling out of her like a long-held secret. "I used to be scared of life, but when you face death in a hospital ward, holding your child's hand, nothing else can really break you again." Madame Rose looked away, her gaze fixed on some distant point. For a long while she said nothing. Then quietly, so softly that Naomi almost didn't hear it, she whispered something Naomi never expected to hear. "They said I wasn't good enough." Naomi's brow furrowed in confusion. "Who, Ma?" "My husband's friends, his family, even people in church," she confessed, her voice cracking with suppressed emotion. "They said I was too young, too flashy, that I was just a trophy wife with no substance." Her voice cracked a little. "I thought if I could control everything, if the house was spotless, if the staff were perfect, if I never let anyone get too close, maybe I'd feel in control of something of my life." Naomi said nothing. She simply sat beside her on the floor. Not too close, not too far, offering no unsolicited advice, issuing no judgments, just simply being there, a silent presence in the midst of the storm. And for the first time, Madame Rose didn't tell her to leave. The next day, Sunday morning, came with soft harmonies and a strange, almost palpable, sense of peace within the house. For the first time since Naomi had arrived, no one shouted her name in anger. There were no doors slammed in fury, no sarcastic remarks echoing from the staircase. The house, for once, felt like it could breathe. Naomi swept the front porch, humming quietly to herself, a soft church chorus her mother used to sing when life felt unbearably heavy. She didn't even notice Madame Rose standing behind her, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Is that a gospel song?" Rose asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Naomi turned, startled. "Yes, Ma. From long ago." Rose nodded. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back inside the house. No insult, no warning, just simple presence. The staff noticed the change immediately. In the kitchen, Mama Ronk whispered to the steward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Did she just pass me without shouting about the pepper?" He nodded slowly, equally stunned. "She even said, 'Good morning.'" "The gateman, Musa?" asked Naomi that afternoon, a perplexed expression on his face. What didn't you give Madame Chop? She day smile this morning. Naomi smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Sometimes people don't need food, Musa. They just need someone not to leave. That evening, something truly strange happened. Naomi entered the master bedroom with a cup of tea, following her usual routine. But this time, Madame Rose was not on the phone, issuing orders or meticulously fixing her nails. She was sitting by the window, holding a small, framed photo of Mr. Femi Richards and his late first wife. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of conflicting emotions. Naomi placed the tea gently on the side table. "Thank you," Madame Rose said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Naomi froze, stunned. It wasn't just that she had said, "Thank you," a word rarely heard within those walls. It was the way she said it, like someone finally letting go of a heavy, crushing load. "You're the first maid that didn't try to impress me," she added after a moment, her voice still soft and subdued. "You just did the work." Naomi spoke softly, her words filled with empathy. "I'm not here to impress you, Ma. I'm here to survive." Rose looked at her again, properly this time, truly seeing her. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Naomi smiled sadly, a hint of melancholy in her eyes. "So has everyone, Ma. Some just hide it better." Madame Rose nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in her words. Then, to Naomi's utter shock, she said, "Tomorrow, take the day off. Visit your daughter. I'll pay for the transport." Naomi's eyes widened, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "Ma!" "I heard you," Rose interrupted gently, her voice firm but kind. "Go and see her. Come back by evening." Naomi blinked back tears. It had been 3 long weeks since she had last seen her child. She hadn't dared to ask for time off, too afraid of the consequences. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost breaking with emotion. Madame Rose turned back to the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Don't thank me. Just don't stop being you." The next morning, Naomi stood at the gate of the mansion, clutching a small white envelope in her trembling hands. Inside it, 20,000 naira was wrapped in tissue paper, folded neatly. Madame Rose had placed it beside her breakfast tray, along with a handwritten note that read, "For transport and whatever she might need." Naomi's hands trembled as she held the envelope tightly. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was desperately needed. It was the gesture, the unexpected kindness, soft, quiet, almost shy, that touched her so deeply. She boarded a kiki from Ikoyi to Surulere, the small 3-wheeled taxi bouncing along the potholed roads. Then she took a crowded bus to the hospital in Masha, where her daughter Deborah had spent the last 2 weeks under quiet observation. Deborah was 9 years old, slim and gentle, with a quiet grace that belied her young age. Her heart condition made her fragile, but her smile was like sunlight, capable of illuminating even the darkest day. When Naomi entered the ward, Deborah looked up, her face lighting up with joy. "Mommy!" Naomi rushed to her and knelt beside the bed, holding her close, burying her face in her daughter's hair. "My baby, I missed you so much." They sat together for a while, Naomi gently feeding her pap, a traditional porridge, and telling her stories. Not stories of pain and struggle, but stories of hope, of resilience, of a brighter future. Then Naomi pulled out a small, cheap, but colorful hair ribbon she had bought from a street vendor along the road. "See what I got you," she said, her voice filled with love. Deborah grinned, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Mommy, you said you'll bring me home when you get money. Is it soon?" Naomi paused, her heart aching with a mixture of hope and fear. She held Deborah's tiny hand in hers and whispered, "Very soon, my love. God is helping us. Just hold on." What she didn't know was that Madame Rose had discreetly called her driver and instructed him to quietly check where she had gone. Not out of suspicion or mistrust, but out of a burgeoning sense of curiosity, a need to understand the woman who had so profoundly impacted her life. When the driver returned, he simply said, his voice neutral, "She went to the hospital in Surulere. The daughter is there. The nurses know her." Madame Rose didn't respond. She just nodded slowly, then went back into her room, closing the door softly behind her. That night, while brushing her hair at her dressing table, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. For a long time, she thought of Naomi's quiet face, etched with lines of hardship but filled with unwavering resolve. She thought of the way her hands shook slightly when she served tea, a subtle reminder of the burdens she carried. She thought of the way she never complained, never sought pity, never gave up. She thought of her daughter, sick and fragile, yet still able to smile. She thought of herself, of the woman she had become, of the sharp edges she had cultivated, of the things she had never said sorry for. And then she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just 2 tears, silent, but they were the first in years. Monday morning came like any other, the sun rising in the east, sunlight filtering through the long white curtains. The kitchen buzzed softly as Mama Ronk stirred stew in a large pot, the aroma filling the air. But something had fundamentally shifted, like the air itself had exhaled a long-held breath. For the first time in weeks, Naomi walked into the house without that familiar weight on her shoulders. She had held her daughter again. She had seen her smile, and somehow, she had glimpsed a different side of Madame Rose, a glimmer of humanity beneath the icy exterior. As she tied her apron and picked up her broom, the housekeeper walked past and stopped, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. You really came back?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Naomi smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "I said I would." From upstairs, Madame Rose's voice called out, but softer this time, almost hesitant. "Naomi, come, please, please." Everyone in the house paused, their movements frozen, as if someone had hit a remote control. Naomi went up to the master bedroom, her heart surprisingly steady. Madame Rose sat at her vanity, brushing her hair, her movements slow and deliberate. "You're back early," she said, not looking up, her voice subdued. "Yes, ma. I left the hospital by 6 a.m. There was a long pause, the silence stretching between them. Then Rose turned, holding a white envelope in her hand. "This is for Deborah's medication." Naomi blinked, stunned by the unexpected gesture. "Ma, Don't argue," Rose interrupted gently, her voice firm but kind. "Just take it." She handed her 50,000 naira in crisp, new bills. Naomi's hands shook as she accepted the envelope, her fingers trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Madame Rose looked away, almost uncomfortable under Naomi's intense gaze. "You said something that day," she said, her voice barely audible, "about how life can break you until nothing scares you anymore." "Yes, ma. Well, I think I've been fighting the wrong people," she confessed, her voice laced with a hint of regret. Naomi looked at her gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "Pain makes us do things, ma, but it doesn't have to make us cruel." That sentence hung in the air like a delicate perfume, soft, lingering, and profoundly true. Later that afternoon, Madame Rose walked into the kitchen and called Mama Ronk by name, her voice calm and even. The old cook nearly dropped her wooden spoon in surprise, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Yes, ma, your stew smells nice," Madame Rose said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "What leaf did you use today?" Mama Ronk stammered, completely taken aback by the unexpected compliment. Just scent leaf and crayfish, ma." Madame Rose nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "It's good. Thank you." The staff couldn't believe it. The silent fear that used to hang in the house like a heavy fog, suffocating everything, was slowly, almost imperceptibly, lifting. Even Mr. Femi Richards noticed the dramatic shift in atmosphere that evening. As he sat in the living room reading his newspaper, he watched his wife pass by, her movements graceful and relaxed, her expression serene. No shouting, no insults, no icy glares. Then he looked at Naomi, who was carefully wiping down the glass table, her movements precise and efficient. He folded his newspaper, set it aside, and said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude, "Thank you, Naomi." Naomi looked up, surprised by the unexpected acknowledgement. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for staying, he clarified, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth she had never seen before. You've done something no one else could. Naomi smiled faintly, bowed her head, and kept cleaning, her heart filled with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Because in that moment, she realized something profound. She hadn't just come to clean a house. She had come to clean pain, to heal wounds. And she had done it one silent day at a time. 2 weeks passed, and in those 2 weeks the house was completely transformed. No shouting, no broken glass, no walking on eggshells. Staff began to smile again, their steps lighter, their spirits lifted. The gardener sang while trimming the hedges, his voice echoing through the garden with joyful abandon. Mama Ronk even made puff-puff, small, sweet fried dough balls, for everyone on Friday morning, a treat she hadn't prepared in over 6 months. But the biggest change of all was in Madame Rose. She no longer barked orders, her voice filled with impatience. She said please and thank you, acknowledging the efforts of those around her. She didn't just walk past Naomi anymore. She waited to ask how her daughter was doing, her voice filled with genuine concern. And then, one Thursday evening, she did something nobody could have ever imagined. She called Naomi into the living room, her expression serious but not unkind. "Dress well tomorrow," she said, her voice calm and measured. Naomi frowned, confused by the unexpected request. "Ma, you're coming with me somewhere," Rose clarified, her eyes meeting Naomi's with a newfound warmth. "Where?" Naomi asked, her voice filled with apprehension. "To my women's luncheon," Rose replied matter-of-factly. Naomi's eyes widened in shock. "Ma, I can't go to that kind of event," she stammered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yes, you can," Rose said calmly, brooking no argument. "You'll just come with me. I want you there." Naomi was speechless, overwhelmed by the unexpected invitation. Madame Rose went on, her voice softening. "There are some women I need to introduce you to. Doctors, NGO workers. One of them runs a health foundation. She may be able to help with Deborah's treatment." Naomi's eyes began to glisten with unshed tears, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "Ma, I don't even have. I already bought you something," Madame Rose interrupted gently, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "It's on your bed." When Naomi returned to her room, there it was, her soft peach-colored gown, simple and elegant, folded neatly beside a matching headscarf. Naomi touched it slowly, reverently, her fingers tracing the delicate fabric. She sat on the edge of the bed and wept quietly, not because she was sad, but because someone, finally, truly saw her. The next day, Naomi rode in the back of Madame Rose's luxurious SUV, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The driver opened the door for her like she belonged, treating her with the same respect and deference he afforded Madame Rose. At the event, people stared, their eyes filled with curiosity and speculation. Madame Rose walked into the fancy restaurant with Naomi by her side, like an equal, not a maid, not a worker, but a woman who mattered, a person of value. "This is Naomi," Rose said to one of the ladies at the table, her voice filled with pride. "She's stronger than most women I know, and her daughter is a fighter." The woman smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I run a children's heart foundation. Maybe we can help. Send me her details." Naomi stood there, frozen in gratitude, her heart overflowing with emotion. And in that moment, she knew that this wasn't just a job anymore. This wasn't just about survival. This was the beginning of something new, something beautiful, something transformative. The next Monday morning started like any other. The sun streaming through the windows, birds chirping outside. Naomi was in the kitchen, gently peeling yam, her hands moving with practiced ease, when her small phone rang, displaying an unknown number. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and answered cautiously. "Hello. Good morning. Is this Miss Naomi, mother of Deborah?" A kind voice asked on the other end of the line. Yes, this is she. This is Dr. Adijua from the Children's Cardiac Foundation. Madame Rose referred you to us after the luncheon last week." Naomi stood slowly, her grip tightening on the phone, the yam peeler falling unnoticed from her hand. "Yes, doctor. I remember her telling me something." "Well, we've reviewed your daughter's case, her test results, her records, and we'd like to sponsor her next 2 procedures fully, at no cost to you." Silence. Naomi gripped the kitchen counter, her knuckles turning white. She blinked back tears, her vision blurring. I'm sorry, Ma. What did you say?" "You heard me, Ma," the doctor said with a smile in her voice. Her voice trembled with emotion. "We're covering everything, the cost of the procedure, all transport, every single medication. We'll even assign a dedicated pediatric nurse for follow-up care after Deborah's surgery." Naomi crumpled to her knees, overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, sweet Jesus." Mama, hearing the commotion, rushed into the kitchen, her face etched with concern. "Naomi, what happened? What's wrong?" Naomi looked up, her eyes red and swollen but a radiant smile breaking through. "They're paying for Deborah's surgery. They're going to do it." The kitchen erupted in a cacophony of joyous shouts and clapping. Even the driver, who had just walked in to collect the car keys, paused, a question in his eyes. "Naomi, you mean, they're really going to do it?" Naomi nodded, tears still flowing, completely overcome with relief. "Madame Rose." She made it happen. Later that evening, Naomi quietly entered Madame Rose's opulent room, carrying a steaming cup of freshly brewed lemon tea. She placed it gently on the mahogany table and turned to leave, not wanting to intrude. "Naomi," Rose's voice stopped her. "Did they call?" Naomi turned slowly, composing herself. "Yes, Ma. This afternoon." She couldn't hold back the fresh wave of tears that welled up. "They're paying for everything, Ma. Deborah can have the surgery. She might actually live. She might have a future." Rose's usually stern eyes softened, a hint of compassion flickering within them. "I told you, Naomi, you don't need to thank me." "But I have to," Naomi insisted, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "You didn't have to help me, a simple maid, but you did. You extended your hand when I was drowning." Madame Rose looked away for a long moment, her gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the window. Then, she said softly, almost to herself, "Helping you helped me." Naomi frowned, puzzled. I don't understand." Rose turned back, her expression thoughtful. "I used to think strength was about controlling everything, about having power over everyone. But I watched you, Naomi, how you suffered quietly, how you served so gently, and how you still managed to smile despite the weight of the world on your shoulders. You reminded me what real strength truly is." She looked Naomi directly in the eye, her voice filled with newfound respect. From that day forward, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The other members of the household staff began to treat Naomi differently, with a newfound deference. The head housekeeper deferred to her opinions. Mama Ronk, the cook, started saving the choicest cuts of meat for Naomi's plate. Even Musa, the usually stoic gateman, now greeted her with a proud, almost familial, "Good morning, Auntie Naomi." On paper, she was still listed as a maid, a servant. But in truth, she had become something far more important, the heart of the home. 2 weeks later, the sterile hospital room hummed with the quiet beeping of machines and the gentle rhythm of slow, steady breaths. Deborah lay peacefully in the hospital bed, wrapped in soft pink sheets, her chest rising and falling in a comforting cadence. The surgery had been a resounding success. Naomi had been a constant presence at her daughter's side for the past 2 days, refusing to leave. She slept fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, prayed fervently through the long nights, and cried silent, grateful tears when the doctor finally delivered the news. "She's doing well, Naomi. The worst is over. She's going to be all right." On the 3rd morning, feeling a surge of hope and exhaustion, she dressed in her cleanest wrapper and prepared to return to the mansion, if only for a short while. She bent down and kissed Deborah's forehead, whispering, "Mommy will be back soon, my angel. Rest well." As Naomi approached the mansion gate, Musa, the gateman, stood ramrod straight, a wide, genuine smile illuminating his face as he swung the gates open. "Auntie Naomi, welcome back." Inside, the compound looked immaculate, freshly swept and polished. The flowers in the garden were meticulously arranged, their vibrant colors seeming to sing a song of hope. The air itself felt lighter, expectant. She walked toward the house, a sense of unease prickling at the back of her neck. She paused, noticing something unusual. All the staff members were gathered in the front yard, waiting. The gardener, the steward, the cleaner, everyone was there. Even Mama Ronk stood in the middle, her face beaming with pride, like a proud auntie at a naming ceremony. Before Naomi could utter a word, the front door swung open. Madame Rose stepped out, not in her usual opulent silk robe, but in a simple, calming blue gown. She wore no makeup, just a soft, genuine smile. "Naomi," she said gently, her voice warm, "welcome back." Naomi bowed her head slightly, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you, Ma. I have something to show you," Rose said, gesturing towards a small table that had been set up under the shade of the ancient mango tree. On it sat a framed document, carefully covered in transparent wrap. Rose lifted it and handed it to Naomi. Naomi carefully opened the document and froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. It was a promotion letter. Head of Household Operations. Naomi looked up, confusion clouding her face. Madame Rose continued, her voice steady and sincere. "You've earned it, Naomi. You'll oversee all the staff now. It comes with better pay, better living quarters, and full medical support for Deborah, moving forward. Everything she needs, she'll have." Naomi couldn't find her voice. She simply stared at the letter, then back at Madame Rose, her mind reeling. "Why me, Ma?" she finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. "Because you did what no one else could," Rose replied, her gaze unwavering. "You didn't just clean the house, Naomi. You cleaned the air, the fear, the pain. You brought light back into this home." She paused, her voice softening even further. "And you stayed, even when I gave you every reason to leave. You didn't let my bitterness drive you away." Naomi covered her mouth, her eyes overflowing with tears. Mama Ronk stepped forward with a tray laden with small chops and pastries. "Make we celebrate small," she said, her laughter infectious. The entire staff erupted in applause and cheers. Even Mr. Femi Richards, who rarely emerged from his study, came downstairs to shake Naomi's hand. "You have done well, Naomi. Thank you for bringing peace back to my home." Naomi could no longer hold back the tears. But this time, they weren't tears of pain, of sorrow, of despair. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of honor. Naomi had never experienced anything like the new staff quarters before. The cramped, dingy room she used to share with brooms and buckets was gone, a distant memory. Now, she had a space of her own, clean, brightly painted, with a small electric fan that actually worked and a soft, comfortable mattress that didn't sag in the middle. But what touched her most deeply wasn't the improved living conditions. It was the way people looked at her now. Not as the lowly maid, not even as the survivor who had endured so much, but as the woman who had brought peace, who had transformed a house filled with darkness into a home filled with light. Every morning, the staff greeted her first, seeking her advice and guidance. The head housekeeper actually asked for her opinion on matters. Even Musa, the gateman, stood straighter, his voice filled with respect, when speaking to her. But the most significant shift was in Madame Rose herself. The shouting had stopped. The constant snapping and criticisms were gone. She started asking Naomi about Deborah's health, her schooling, even her favorite colors. She showed genuine interest in their lives. Then, one night, something even deeper transpired. Naomi was in the kitchen, quietly packing away leftovers, when Madame Rose entered, her presence unusually subdued. She wore no makeup, no slippers, just her simple robe and bare feet. "Do you have a minute, Naomi?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Naomi nodded, setting down the container she was holding. They walked together to the back patio, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Crickets chirped their soothing melody in the garden. Then Rose said, her voice barely a whisper, Do you know I was once a housemaid too? Naomi turned sharply, surprised by the revelation. Ma, I was 13 when it happened, Rose continued, her voice distant, lost in the memories of the past. My mother, she died. And your father? Naomi asked gently. Well, Rose said bitterly. He wasn't the father type. I ended up working in a rich man's house in Enugu. His wife, she hated me. She didn't hit me, you see. She didn't even insult me out loud. But she made sure I felt worthless, like a stray dog that had wandered in off the street. I was invisible to her, less than nothing. Naomi's heart ached for the young girl Rose had once been. I told myself, I vowed, that one day I would be the madam, that I would never be weak again, that nobody would ever treat me as if I were small, insignificant, worthless. I would be powerful, I would be in control. She looked away, a flicker of shame crossing her face. I became strong, cold, sharp. I thought that was power, that was the only way to survive. But when I met you, Naomi, I saw something else entirely. Naomi listened quietly, her hand resting on Rose's arm in support. You reminded me of the girl I buried deep inside myself. The girl who cried silently while scrubbing someone else's floors. You didn't fight with pride, with anger, with bitterness. You fought with patience, with quiet dignity, with unwavering faith. And you brought light into a very dark world. There was a long, pregnant pause. Then Rose added softly, I'm sorry, Naomi, for everything. Naomi reached out and gently placed her hand over Madame Rose's. And for a moment, they sat there in the moonlight, two women from vastly different worlds, bound together by shared pain, softened by mutual understanding. Naomi whispered, her voice filled with compassion. Sometimes, God doesn't take us through the fire to burn us, Ma. He takes us through the fire to make us light for others who are still trapped inside the dark. Madame Rose nodded slowly, tears quietly sliding down her cheeks, glistening in the moonlight. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, because this time, they were healing her, washing away the years of pain and bitterness. It was a bright, beautiful Friday morning when Deborah finally came home. Naomi stood at the gate, her hands trembling with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation as the taxi pulled up to the curb. Inside, her precious daughter sat, wearing a vibrant yellow dress, her cheeks fuller, her smile brighter than Naomi had seen in years. A small, barely visible scar sat near her chest, the only lasting proof of the ordeal she had survived. Mommy! Deborah cried, her voice filled with pure joy. Naomi practically ripped the car door open and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tight. She didn't cry. She simply held her, breathing in the familiar smell of soap and childhood innocence, overwhelmed with gratitude and hope. But what Naomi didn't expect was what came next. The entire household staff was waiting. Under the shade of the mango tree, a small table had been set up, laden with refreshments. Juice, chin-chin, and puff-puff were arranged on clean trays. The cook, Mama Ronk, had prepared a mountain of fragrant jollof rice with fried plantain. The cleaner had even brought out plastic chairs for everyone to sit on. Musa, the gateman, had festooned the tree with colorful balloons made from inflated rubber gloves. And right in the middle of them all, wearing a soft pink gown and a radiant smile, stood Madame Rose. She walked up to Deborah, knelt beside her, and offered her a small, beautifully wrapped gift. It's a storybook, Deborah, she said gently. Naomi said you like to read. I thought maybe we could start reading one together sometime? Deborah took the gift shyly, her eyes wide with wonder. Thank you, Ma. Rose smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Call me Auntie Rose, dear. Naomi watched the scene unfold before her, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Once upon a time, she had been slapped for accidentally spilling water. Now, those same hands were gently combing through her daughter's hair. Mr. Femi Richards stepped forward next, clearing his throat, his expression unusually warm. I don't usually say much in this house, he said, his gaze fixed on Deborah. But I must say this, Naomi. You have reminded us what true strength looks like. Welcome home, Deborah. He turned to Deborah, a hint of emotion in his voice. "You are always welcome here, my dear. This is your second home now." The entire staff erupted in applause, showering Deborah with their heartfelt welcome. Deborah grinned, her face radiant with happiness. Naomi turned to Madame Rose and whispered, her voice choked with emotion, I don't know how to thank you, Ma." Rose shook her head, her smile gentle and knowing. "You already did, Naomi. You didn't leave. You stayed and you saved us all." As the sun climbed higher in the sky and laughter filled the yard, something became undeniably clear. The mansion on Bishop Adame Drive, once known for its stifling silence and harsh reprimands, now echoed with something entirely different: joy, family, light, and love. And it all started because one woman, Naomi, didn't give up, didn't lose hope, and didn't leave. Weeks passed. Deborah grew stronger with each passing day. She laughed more, ate heartily, and blossomed under the outpouring of love and support. Sometimes, she accompanied Naomi to the mansion, sitting quietly with a book while her mother worked, her presence a constant reminder of the miracle that had unfolded. The house itself had undergone a remarkable transformation. The cold, echoing marble floors now echoed with the sound of small footsteps and joyful laughter. The walls that once held fear and resentment now radiated warmth and affection. And Madame Rose, she changed the most of all. She started teaching Deborah how to fold napkins and water the garden, sharing her knowledge and nurturing her spirit. She smiled more often, listened more attentively, and every now and then, she would sit with Naomi under the mango tree, not as employer and employee, but as two women, sharing their stories and their dreams. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Naomi sat with Deborah in her lap, humming softly while peeling oranges. Madame Rose stepped out onto the patio, carrying 2 cups of zobo, a traditional hibiscus tea. She handed one to Naomi, her gaze thoughtful. Then, she said something that would stay with Naomi forever, etched into her memory. "You know, Naomi, the day I slapped you, I was so sure you'd leave, just like all the others had done before. I almost wanted you to leave. I couldn't stand the thought of anyone seeing who I really was underneath all the pride, all the anger, all the carefully constructed defenses." Naomi looked at her gently, her eyes filled with understanding. And now, Rose smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "Now, I thank God every single day that you didn't leave. You were a gift I didn't know I needed." She took a sip of her tea, then added, her voice thick with emotion, "You weren't just a maid in this house, Naomi. You were the mirror I was too scared to look into, and the comfort I never knew I needed." Naomi wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, her voice filled with gratitude, "And you gave my daughter a second chance at life, Ma. I will never, ever forget that." As the evening breeze swayed the branches of the mango tree, and the sound of laughter echoed from the kitchen, Naomi closed her eyes and breathed in the peace that had settled over her life, over their lives. She had come to this house with nothing but pain, silence, and a worn nylon bag filled with her meager belongings. Now she had respect, she had honor, she had a home, she had a family, and she had hope. And she had become the woman no one would ever forget. Not because she fought, not because she shouted, but because she stayed. And in staying, she healed. Sometimes, the strongest people don't make the most noise. They don't throw fists, they don't raise their voices. They simply stay. And in staying, they change everything. End screen. If you were touched by Naomi's story, let us know in the comments below. Where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe to Folktales by Olivia for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep watching.